the crown right now.
Well, you know, I got to agree with Captain Obvious there. There's no question about it that this is what Anthony Davis is doing. He's definitely a candidate for league MVP. He's definitely in the discussion for best player in the world. And it's just he just brings a different dimension to the game. You know what? He's not going to play point forward like LeBron James is, but his shot is good. He can play with his back to the basket or facing the basket. He can rebound. He can defend. He blocks shots. He can literally defend any position on the front line, and some two guards in this league because he's that versatile. So he's that complete of a player. We didn't talk about him too much because the New Orleans Pelicans were not winning. But without DeMarcus Cousins, they clearly have been doing it. Alvin Gentry deserves he's doing a hell of a job. We were wondering about him a few months ago, but Alvin Gentry has stepped up his coaching and deserves to be recognized for the outstanding job that he's been doing for them during this 9-game winning streak. But when you look at Anthony Davis, to be 6'10", 6'11", to have the inside-outside game that he has, to take over the way that he has taken over, to average about 40. And by the way, when he's doing this, it's always about 10, 12, 15, 18 rebounds along the way with a couple of block shots. You definitely have to look at him and say, when we have a discussion about the best in the world, we need to stop limiting it to LeBron James and Kevin Durant. Anthony Davis has to be inserted into that stratosphere. By the way, even ahead of Kawhi Leonard, because as efficient as Kawhi Leonard is, if I'm going to get, and obviously there's no comparison, Max, so please don't take it this way, but if I'm going to sit up there and look at Alonzo Ball, for example, as a rookie, and point to his level of assertiveness, I need to look the same at Kawhi Leonard when he returns, because there are moments, as great as Kawhi Leonard is, and as efficient as he is, the one thing that you could look at him from time to time is you wished that he was a bit more assertive and more aggressive offensively in terms of looking for his shot and looking for those points. It might be a product of playing the San Antonio system. It might be a product of what Greg Popovich wants him to do. But when I look at Anthony Davis, I see a willingness to take over. And that's what I'm saying elevates him above a Kawhi Leonard, because he does most of the things that Kawhi Leonard does defensively, but Kawhi doesn't do what he does offensively.
Max, on that note, let me ask you this, though. So when would Anthony Davis surpass LeBron as best player in the world? When do you see that happening?
Well, I mean, these things are hard to gauge as they're happening because you need a bigger body of evidence, right? So, like I'm saying, by the end of next year, it'll be obvious that, you know, he passed LeBron. So really what I'm saying is maybe the process has started already, and next year, right from the beginning of the year, I think you're going to notice that LeBron is no better than Anthony Davis. Davis has done things, and we got past him so quickly because of Embiid, because of Porzingis, because of Karl Anthony Towns. We're always looking for next. And as Stephen A. mentioned, when you're hidden on the Pelicans and they never really put a team around you, you're not playing meaningful games. So we're looking for what's next. But meantime, what's here right now is a guy who's fulfilled the potential we thought maybe he had a couple of years ago. And it's like, is this guy already a top 3 or 4 player? Then he got hurt a little bit. He's never quite played a full season. They get him Boogie Cousins. And some were lamenting, well, this is not coming together the way it should. I'm not sure about that. They started to play better and better together. By the way, not coincidentally, the one loss the Rockets have had when they've all been healthy is to AD and Boogie. That was the game that Boogie got hurt in the last 10 seconds. Who knows how good the Pelicans may have been by the end of this season with those two playing together. AD has had to be more assertive since Boogie went down. He's able to do that. He's able to, as I've mentioned, guard the pick and roll by himself, guard both guys. Like, he's done things that I've never seen before. And he's not always the sexy pick because he's not what's next. He's not a guy who's gonna like a wing, a two-way wing, who's gonna score 1 million points by giving you those highlight kind of plays necessarily. He's just probably, if he's not already, very soon going to be the best two-way player in the game. As I said, might deserve the MVP this year. Of course, Harden's just out of his mind, so maybe that's a tough call. And maybe he's already the best in the game, but I think by the end of next year, the body of work will be there to say it much more definitively.
Well, the other thing that we have to point to is the fact that he's going to be in the Western Conference, and so the competition is obviously stiffer because the parity that exists within the conferences are not even, and that's really the level of competition rather is not even, and that's something that LeBron James, one of the things that people have lamented about LeBron is that his entire career has been in the East on a night in night out basis. For the most part, he's not going up against those boys in the West. Anthony Davis is doing that. If Anthony Davis were in the Eastern Conference, my God, what would happen? What would happen then? Right now in the Western Conference, the New Orleans Pelicans are the 4th seed. They got a 9-game winning streak. You know who's number 3? Portland with Damian Lillard. If the playoffs, obviously with the beginning of the day, Max, you got Denver as an 8th seed. You know what's beautiful about this NBA season? The Clippers are only a half game out of that 8th seed. So if the Clippers were to usurp or eclipse, leap over Denver, what you would have is the Clippers going against Houston in the first round. And who knows what kind of emotions would be revealed during that time and what that could ultimately lead to. So it's all very interesting. But in the end, what it comes down to is that Anthony Davis is doing what he's doing in the West without DeMarcus Cousins. And when you take that into consideration, that's something that you have to look at when you're thinking about the best player in the world because of the conditions under which they're subjected to.
Keep in mind, like, when have we seen Anthony Davis really in a meaningful game? The most meaningful game I can recall is when San Antonio was fighting for playoff position. They were fighting for seeding still, last game of the season, a couple of years ago. And it was both teams needed the game. And as I recall, the San Antonio Spurs were full strength. And AD basically by himself beat the Spurs when the Spurs had something to play for. Now, he didn't have a team around him. Once you get to the playoffs, but he beat the Spurs, Stephen A. Like, when the stakes went up, AD showed up.
Wait a minute. You're forgetting something. Yeah, he beat the Spurs in a regular season game that mattered, that propelled them. But that same year, they went to the playoffs. He had no help. He was a one-man army against Golden State. They got swept, true. But he averaged 30 by himself against Golden State.
Yep.
So I look at that as being even bigger than a win against San Antonio.
When you think about Anthony Davis, and I know it's positionless basketball. You don't want to call him a center exactly. It's kind of unfair to call him a power forward because who would you rather have, Karl Malone in his prime or this Anthony Davis? I don't have to think about that very hard. This Anthony Davis is better than Karl Malone ever was. This Anthony Davis or Charles Barkley in his prime? I'm taking this Anthony Davis. This Anthony Davis or Dirk Nowitzki in his prime? I'm taking AD.
Hold on. Whoa. Here's your problem. You got to consider that. The game is so tightly, you could say Cottonelle Tissue is a huge sponsor, for crying out loud.
Yeah,
that's how soft the NBA has become compared to that. So if the game were as physical, what would Anthony Davis do? Because even though he might be better, he was more fragile than a Barkley. Barkley wasn't the one getting hurt a lot.
We'll never know.
That was Anthony Davis.
Right. Sure.
Well, we know that.
We'll never know.
That we know.
But what we can see, what we can see is how they each fared in their era. I'm saying, and you're saying, we're both saying, like, AD, if he's not already the best player in the world, is maybe top 3 already. Maybe he's about to be best player in the world. We never thought that about Karl Malone. We never thought that about Charles Barkley. Dirk Nowitzki for a moment. We never thought that about Kevin Garnett. I mean,
yeah, but there's something wrong with your
analogy. Think about that. Okay, Tim Duncan is a separate thing, but like AD, Tim Duncan was a rim-protecting 4. What's that?
Yeah, but you're dissecting it. You're dissecting it too much. What's wrong with your analogy? Like, for example, Michael Jordan comes along. Would Michael Jordan have been Michael Jordan if it wasn't for Dr. J? Would Dr. J have been Dr. J if it wasn't for Connie Hawkins? The eras that precede you teach you and elevate you to another level. So when I look at guys of this era and we trying to compare them to guys from eras past, I got to look at what those guys in the past did for these guys today. And I think the same has to be done with Anthony Davis.
No doubt. No doubt, but I'm saying you're choosing up teams. A lot of guys that came after Jordan, I'm still taking MJ. Ain't no one come around since MJ where I'm taking it. I got the #1 pick, MJ, thank you. What I'm saying is applying that, I'm taking AD, except for Tim Duncan. I'm taking him against all the, and by the way, maybe one day we'll stay include Tim Duncan. He is a different kind of cat. We're seeing something new and unique and all-time great.
We got to take a break, guys. Wizards, Pelicans on Friday. That'll be a good one. Stephen A., I know you'll be watching it closely. When we come back, some of the draft